Well, so glad that we've got folks joining us today and excited to talk about our money and politics agenda for this year. We've got a great group of panelists, bill sponsors here to talk about the work that we've got going on. And it's really one of our most ambitious and exciting years that we've had in a while when it comes to fighting big money in politics in Maine. I will just go over our agenda here and do some quick introductions as we get started. So my name is Anna Keller. I'm the executive director for Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, and I'm excited to be joined today by a panel of some of our internal team working on money and politics, as well as our friends and allies in the legislature and working on these bills with us. We'll first go over the a bit of the context to where we are this session, some of what we were able to achieve and the unfinished business from last year and the next and the last election and how that's impacted the upcoming session. And then we're going to talk through the agenda, starting with the Protect Maine Elections campaign. We're excited to be joined today by Kaitlin, who is the campaign manager. What's your title, Kaitlin?
Campaign manager is fine.
Yes, campaign manager for the Protect Maine Elections effort, and Senator Rick Bennett, who is the chair and very involved in that campaign. Thank you. We will then talk about the two bills that we're working on that are related to increasing disclosure, and Senator Bennett is the sponsor of one of those. So we're excited that he's able to be here with us to talk about that as well. And then we're going to talk a bit about our work in expanding clean elections, both at the county level with the bill we've got in, and we'll have a recorded conversation that we had earlier with Senator Ben Chipman, who's sponsoring that bill. He wasn't able to join us at this time, but we chatted earlier. And then we'll finish with a bit of an update on Portland clean elections, which was passed last year and which we are excited about implementing, and go to your questions and what you can do to be involved. So, like I said, we're excited to be joined by our team. I've mentioned here that some of our great guests that we've got, but I'm also very happy to have with us today Ann Luther and Allison Smith, who are two of our longstanding great leaders on money and politics work in the state, who do this work as volunteers and as board members with Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, and Lane Sturdivant, our organizer. And we're all going to be in some conversation today. If you've got questions as we go, feel free to drop things in the chat or use the Q&A function, but we will in particular be answering questions when we get to the end. So we had a pretty good session overall when it came to democracy reform work at last year, though there were a couple of big things that we weren't able to get done. Our biggest accomplishment was passing a ban on contributions from corporations to legislators or legislative candidates or to the leadership PACs that they control. This is going into effect, or just went into effect this January, and it's a really great step forward for Maine. We, unfortunately, though, were not able to pass the other major bill that we were working on last year, which was banning foreign government-owned entities and corporations from making contributions to referendum campaigns. That bill was passed, was vetoed, and was not able to overcome the veto. And we will be talking more about what that means and the campaign that then generated in a few minutes. So it was a mixed response, but we were still really happy to have gotten that to have gotten that corporate contribution and passed. And then the clean election story has been really positive. So our participation rate rose in the 2022 election among legislators. So the current legislature, 64% of them used clean elections. That's up from 59% in the last legislature. was an all-time high where we were at 85%. We have not been at that for a while, but I am very encouraged by this strong participation among our current legislators. And the other big victory from last year was that Portland voted to create a municipal campaign finance system and have clean elections for our municipal candidates. And so we'll talk more about what that means practically, but that was a really big victory and a long time coming. I want to ask Anne and Allison, would you say a little bit about where you see us coming into this session, what we, the context we're in terms of this legislature, and what our prospects are for making change this year?
I mean, I'll start. I think that in some ways, corporate activity in these recent ballot questions has really raised the profile of the money and politics question in Maine and provided opportunities for us to look with renewed energy at some of the ways big money shapes our public policy, not only in ballot question campaigns, but in candidate races as well. So, I know we're going to talk specifically about banning corporate contributions from foreign government-owned entities in ballot questions, but that has just given us a chance to see how the pervasive influence of big money seeps into these important questions that face Maine voters and gives us a chance to look in some other corners of the secret big money at the same time. So I think we're in a more favorable environment now than we have been probably since 2010 or 2011.
Thanks. Allison.
Yeah, well, I guess I would say it's appropriate that this lunch and learn is happening on, sorry about that, on Groundhog's Day, because this idea of trying to, get big money out of politics and separate, our public offices from private money is a perennial challenge. And Maine people have, been vigilant and done a great job over the years, but, it's a perennial favorite. And so here we are once again, trying to close loopholes and prevent corruption and open up opportunity for democracy to thrive in Maine. So I think for me, the most important thing is for especially folks who get on this call and the people you talk with. I'm sure you love to talk politics with your friends and family, and probably people complain to you about politics and about money in politics. And I think the one thing we all really need to do is remember what our role is as citizens. Some have said that the role of citizen is the most important in a democracy, and it's the legislative session. We all are represented in Augusta by a couple of folks, and they need to hear from us. And they need to hear from us when these specific bills come up. But they also need to hear from us in general to remind them why Maine people support clean elections, why Maine people support, reining in the role of big money in Maine. We've had clean elections in place since the year 2000, which is terrific. We were the first statewide clean election system in the country, and we probably are still among the most robust and successful. And that's not an accident. It's because Maine people have been vigilant. So I just want to remind people that we can never take that for granted. We must remain vigilant. And when you get a chance, remind your legislators that you want them to use clean elections, that you want them to support clean elections funding in the legislature, that you want them to consider expanding clean elections because of the benefits it's brought to legislative races, to more races. We need to be there to counter the arguments that we have clean elections, but we still haven't succeeded in getting all the big money out of politics. Well, it's true. There's no one silver bullet. We need to remain vigilant, but clean elections and these reforms, they're good for democracy, and that's the bottom line. And it's our job to keep that message in the foreground.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Anne. I want to go to talking about Protect Maine Elections, a campaign that we're really happy to be part of. And First off, Senator Bennett, would you say a little bit about how you got involved with the effort to get foreign corporate money out of Maine politics and how this campaign came about?
Sure, thank you. But at the outset, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Anna, for your leadership, and for Anne and Allison. I've worked with you for now decades, I hate to say, but it's
I know.
full. Groundhog's Day is a good reminder. Thank you. And we have been at this a long time. And I have to say that the leadership of Maine Citizens for Clean Elections has been extraordinary and so important in making sure that the vigilance is maintained and that our elections move in the right directions in terms of civic culture in Maine. And it makes our state, and your leadership has made our state a better place for political discourse. So thank you very, very much. On this issue, I was shocked to learn when I wasn't even in the Senate. I had served earlier, but independent Representative Kent Ackley put a bill in because at the time it became clear in the CMP corridor debate where we had a government-owned entity, Hydro-Quebec, spending tens of millions of dollars in Maine in referenda, that Hydro-Quebec being owned by the province of Quebec, it just exposed this loophole in our law. And so I actually testified on that bill, found myself elected to the legislature. It died because of the COVID session. Found myself elected in 2020, put the bill back in to close this loophole. And mind you, this is a loophole. The Federal Election Commission has ruled that foreign entities, people, companies, governments cannot be involved in US elections at the state or federal level. But they said that they claim they don't have jurisdiction over state, municipal, and state elections by referendum. So we're trying to close that loophole. And so this effort grew out of a bill that I put in, co-sponsored by now Senator Nicole Grahowski. She was the House Republican House lead sponsor on this. She's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Bipartisan measure, sailed through the legislature, 11-2 out of committee, strong bipartisan majorities in both the House and Senate, but was vetoed by Governor Mills. I think probably because of the context of an ongoing election where, again, Hydro-Quebec was spending tens of millions of dollars. So this isn't related. I want to say, for me, this isn't related to any particular campaign. This is about a principle, which is elections should be for Maine people and not foreign actors. I think that's something that most every Mainer agrees to. When the bill was vetoed, some of us got together and said, this is a really important issue. So we formed a coalition, happy to have MCCE part of our coalition. And we started collecting signatures. We collected over 80,000. We made it onto the ballot to make this become law by citizen petition. So that's a little bit of my background with this issue. We're so fortunate to have Kaitlin LaCasse, who is a very experienced hand in governmental reform matters here in Maine, managing our effort. Her leadership has been tremendous. We've got very strong support nationally that she can tell you about, as well as here in the state with a real nonpartisan coalition. I don't want to say bipartisan because it's nonpartisan. The support for this is across the board uniformly. People want to see our elections reformed, and this is like the very first step in doing that. And I'll let her also talk about some how the measure itself and some other wrinkles to it. But I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Kaitlin, would you say a little bit about, first off, what exactly is in the referendum question? Because there's a couple of parts to it, and what gets you excited about this and the impact that it can have on Maine and even on the country?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to echo Senator Bennett's words. We just are so grateful for Maine Citizens for Clean Elections and all the work you have done over the last years and years that really have helped pave the way for some of this. I mean, it's a thank you. We're grateful. So the Protect Maine Elections Initiative has two main provisions. One, which Senator Bennett talked about, would prohibit contributions from foreign governments or foreign government controlled and influenced entities to campaigns here in Maine. I mean, when we're out talking with voters, most are shocked to learn that that is even possible right now. And we recently got polling that I'll show you here, which shows that 89% of Maine voters support prohibiting foreign governments from influencing our elections. That is not, that's part of the culture. That's what it is. So that's the first piece that Senator Bennett just talked about. And then the second piece affirms Maine's support for an anti-corruption amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and actually charges the Maine Ethics Commission with reporting annually on how our congressional delegation is doing towards forwarding that amendment. And that's really important because, it's one thing to say, well, Maine supports this, but to have an accountability measure, I think it's I've already said the word important, but it's important. It's also it's unique here. Several 22 states have said that they support such an amendment, but Maine would be unique in our ability to kind of track and see how our delegation is doing towards that, which is really important. And to be clear, that amendment would allow us to more easily place reasonable limits on campaign spending. So it would undo some of the damage that past Supreme Court rulings have allowed. So that is what we are doing. Sorry, was there a second part to that you wanted me to talk
You touched on it a little bit, but I was saying what makes you excited in terms of the impact that this can have.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it is all about getting our elections back to the voters. And right now, voters are just not on even playing fields with people who have billions of dollars to spend. I mean, and it's just, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. I think it was 86% of voters in the United States see money in politics as one of the largest threats to our democracy. And if we want to have control, and if we say that voters should have control, we can't have entities essentially buying elections. And so that's what makes me excited. Is really just, and in Maine, we have such this civic fabric. We have, voter turnout that everybody can be, jealous of. And this is just adding towards that and just making sure we're really centering our elections with the voter.
Thanks. No, that's great. What are some of the next steps for this? So the signatures have been collected. There's, a couple of paths that it could take from here. What's next, and what do you see as the challenges to overcome between now and getting it into law?
Absolutely. So right now, the signatures have been collected. The Secretary of State have certified those signatures. So now the initiative actually goes to the legislature, where Senator Bennett and his colleagues have the opportunity to pass it outright, or send it to the voters on the November 2023 ballot. We are hoping that the legislature will pass it. I mean, it is clear that Maine voters support this. We don't need to wait any longer. It is time to make it happen. Senator Bennett, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I know we're grateful for your leadership.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this I think that would be the easiest course. Clearly, we would like to get this to be law as soon as possible, and it allows the Constitution through the citizen initiative process allows the measure first to be considered by the legislature before it goes to the people. Now, if the legislature doesn't enact it, tries to amend it, or changes it in any way, the original measure goes out to the public. And so we have that protection. They can't tinker with it. They can either accept what the petitioners are asking, or they can send it out for enactment. And that's the way that works. I just have to say, money in politics is the threshold issue on every other issue. As a candidate myself, it's so frustrating to see vast sums of money come into an election and not only affect the outcome, but change the debate. So if you're a candidate and you want to talk about certain things, or you think you're running because certain things are important to you, somebody comes in, and not for a state Senate race yet, but for the US Senate race or a House race or the governor's race, where tens of millions up to $200 million are being spent routinely in these elections. That kind of spending actually changes the debate. Instead of talking about what are important to Mainers, we're talking about what is important to these special interest groups. And again, most of that money is dark. It's not money coming through campaigns. It's dark. You don't know the sourcing. Nobody's standing behind it and saying, this is me speaking, but they're using $1 million megaphone to drown out the voices of Maine citizens. And so it's critical that we do this. I have a sense of urgency about it. I'd like to see it passed in this legislature.
We had one question come in the chat, which is, so can the governor veto it this time?
Yeah, yes, the governor can do that if it lands on her desk. We're hoping to pass it with a supermajority of 2/3 in both chambers, which would make it "quote unquote" veto proof. That's not a technical term; it's a more of a political term. The governor has many options, and I think, as I said, I think the context of her previous opposition to the other bill on which this measure is predicated was contextual to a particular ongoing debate. Now, the governor can sign the bill, she can veto it, but she can also let it become law without her signature. So we're hoping that that we can get it through either in one of those ways. The legislature, if we pass it with strong enough majorities, we can make this law without going to the ballot. Now, that's always the backstop, and that's where it will go. I would encourage all of you, as this bill winds its way through the legislature, to communicate your support to your legislators, your member of the House, your member of the Senate, but also to the governor's office, so that because we do listen. I mean, hearing from 10 or 20 people on an issue is a rarity, honestly. And if this it motivates you to close this important loophole that needs closing and to reform our politics in a positive direction, I would encourage you to lean into this moment.
Thanks. Are there other questions that are related to this bill? I'm just thinking, while we have our experts here from this campaign who may not be able to stick with us to the end of the hour, if there are other questions related to this referendum.
I posed a question in the chat that Kaitlin answered, and I think maybe she could answer that for listeners who may have the same question as me. Go ahead, Kaitlin.
Absolutely. So the question was, if the legislation is vetoed, can it still go to the ballot? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And so while we hope that the legislature and the governor will lead on this issue, it is clear from our conversations out around the state and in the poll and in the data that we have that Maine voters are ready to lead on this issue, as they have in campaign finance reform efforts forever. So that's still a good option for us as well. It's nice when Plan B works just as well as Plan A.
And not only can it go to the ballot, it must
go to the ballot.
Constitution. If it isn't enacted just as we've presented it, the citizens have presented it, it must go to the ballot.
Thank you so much, Senator Bennett and Kaitlin. Really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions, and you're welcome to stick around. In fact, Senator Bennett, I hope you'll stick around, because we are going to talk about one of the other things we're working on together next. We are, like I said, putting forward a couple of our own bills that were coming from MCCE agenda this year. And one of those is true source disclosure. So this bill, in a nutshell, it requires that PACs that are spending money in Maine, that are running ads that we see so many of actually have to disclose the true source of the funds that they're using in Maine. What we've seen so frequently is that while we have disclosure, they'll say, oh, yes, I got money and this money came from ADC PAC and we have no idea who that is, or that they got money from a 501c4 corporation that doesn't have to disclose its donors. And so often our transparency, it hits a wall and we don't get to the true source of where this money is coming from. So this bill would change that. It would require that at least one original source be named for that spending in Maine. And this is a measure that has already been passed in Arizona and in Alaska. And there are other states that are working on this as well. And we are hopeful that Maine can join that list and that we can make our disclosure system be a bit more meaningful and robust here. I wanted to ask Senator Bennett what you see, since I know you think this is an important issue, what you think will be the impact of this bill if we can get it passed.
I think this is critical, and it's allowed under the Citizens United, clearly constitutional, under the Citizens United decision, which was predicated, I might say, on disclosure being, the sunlight is the best disinfectant, that old line. And unfortunately, in political spending, there is no sunlight. And we need to demand sunlight. 8 justices in the Citizens United decision said, disclosure is the important thing. So we are leaning into disclosure. And as other states have done, it's critical that we know where the money comes from and that the people who are speaking, if you want to have free speech, identify themselves. This isn't, by the way, free speech, this is paid speech. If you're speaking out in the public forum, your identity is known. In this forum, people can spend billions without their identity being known, their interests being disclosed, and without any understanding about why somebody is adopting a particular point of view. And those points of view are not held to scrutiny as to the veracity because you don't know who's actually speaking. So this is a critical reform. It would simply require PACs to disclose the original source of funds. And by original source, we mean either the individual that earned the income, the business that earned the profits, or the inherited wealth from which the spending originates. It has to go back to those kinds of sources, those original sources. It's not, the Chamber of Commerce, PAC, or whatever it might be. We need to know who is behind this spending. And as I say, it's not the entire solution, but this is probably one of the most critical things we can do under current law, under the current Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, to actually reform our politics and make sure that Maine people have the information to judge the validity and veracity and the interests of those who are spending millions of dollars in our elections. And by the way, last election in 2022, there was over $120 million spent in an off year in Maine elections. It was unprecedented. The money keeps going up and up and up. And so this becomes more and more critical.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Other folks on our team, anything else that we want to say about this bill and its importance? I'm going to move us on to our next one then, and we can absolutely come back if folks have questions on this. But the next thing that we want to talk about is another disclosure bill. And here we're talking, we went from big Citizens United, hundreds of millions of dollars, and now we're talking about something that might seem small at first, but that is nonetheless extremely important, and that is disclosure at the municipal level. And this is really another loophole that we have in our elections in Maine, where right now most towns are not required to, don't require that spending on campaigns is disclosed in any way. Towns that are over 15,000 in population have to abide by state law here. And in those towns, there are requirements for disclosure. A few other towns have opted into that system, but for the vast majority of places in Maine, there isn't anything. And in a lot of cases, people might think, oh, well, there isn't much spending in those towns, but we're seeing that that is not always the case. And in particular, that there have been some really glaring examples over the last few years of large amounts of money being spent to influence, in particular, referendums at the municipal level. So this bill that we are putting in, it's sponsored by Representative Ann Matlack, and it requires that anyone that's spending over $5,000 in a local referendum question would have to file as a PAC, and they'd have to do that with the State Ethics Commission. And the reason that we put it that way is that they're the people who have the infrastructure to actually run that disclosure and make sure that it gets to the public, whereas many of these very small towns, in some cases, that would be more challenging. So we're excited that this could close, like I said, close this loophole. And Lane, our organizer, is based in the Mid-Coast, where some of this has been coming up, has been looking into what some of these situations where this has been an issue. And so, Lane, I wanted to ask you what you've been seeing with this and why you think this is an important bill for us to be working on.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what you said about the vast majority of towns currently not having any disclosure requirements. I did a little math earlier, and according to our 2020 census sort of population figures, there's only 15 municipalities in Maine out of almost 500 right now that have that requirement because they are over the 15,000 population threshold, which means that something like 70% of Mainers are living in a town that is not currently covered by any sort of disclosure requirement for local ballot initiatives and sort of local issues like that. We found that it was hard to figure out exactly the extent of this problem because it's not disclosed. So, we've heard of issues that have come up in recent years on ballots where we suspect that there was a lot of spending, even in small towns. We've seen it, I think, increase with the fact that there's been a lot of federal and state money coming to smaller towns for infrastructure things like expanding broadband. And so these are pools of money that these small towns previously didn't have, and now they have to figure out how to spend that money to achieve that goal. And there are different paths that they could go down, and one of them is often like going with private contractors or a private company to service that infrastructure expansion. And so we're seeing that those companies have like sort of a vested financial interest in presenting their case to the town to get that that kind of contract or to be the ones appointed for that. There's also, like, I think just knowing, if you look around in the sort of tourist industries and other sort of economies of small towns, we sometimes do have outsized issues in small towns. I'm thinking of things like cruise ships in coastal towns where the town itself might only have 7,000 year-round residents, but then there's some sort of industry interest in the town that is, millions of dollars of earnings potential for some company or something, and they really have a vested interest again in seeing that the policy and ordinances of the town are in their financial interests. So just Anne's putting some things in the chat too, but I think that if this is enacted, we will see this come up. We will see spending over 5,000 on local referendums. Maybe not every town every year, but it will come up on these issues like fish farms, that Veterans Memorial that's been talked about a lot down east, things like that.
Yeah, thank you, Lane. This is something that, as we and our other partners with the League of Women Voters, we've been talking a lot about local government recently and local elections and the importance of what happens at the municipal level that often doesn't get as much attention, though it deeply impacts people's lives. And so this local disclosure really fits with that as well, that it's really important for us to not leave out what happens at this level of our government and our elections. Great. So I'm going to move from disclosure now to clean elections. And here, like I mentioned, we have a recorded video between our colleague Will Hayward and Senator Ben Chipman, who is sponsoring a bill that would extend clean elections to county level offices, which is something that's been a long time goal for Maine Citizens for Clean Elections that we're excited to be tackling this year. So I'm going to play the video that they recorded earlier of this conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Will Hayward, and I'm the Advocacy Program Coordinator for Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. For this segment, I'm joined by Senator Ben Chipman to talk about an important money and politics priority he's sponsoring, a clean elections program for county offices. Senator Chipman is in his third term representing part of Portland in the Maine Senate after 3 terms in the Maine House of Representatives. He's been a longtime champion of clean elections and campaign finance transparency, and we're thrilled that he's able to join us to talk a little bit about this proposal for county level clean elections. Senator Chipman, thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, first off, let's just start with the basics. What would this proposed legislation do?
Well, so we, as many of you may know, we have a system of clean elections for state level offices here in Maine. We've had in place, I believe, since 1996 when it was passed in a citizens referendum for legislative offices for candidates who run for state house, for state senate, and for candidates for governor. It's worked quite well over the last 20 plus years that it's been in effect for. It's been modified and there's been improvements made along the way, but we've got a really good system here in Maine, model for the country, and other states I think have followed Maine's lead. I think we were the first one to do this, and there's now systems like this in place in Arizona and some other places. And so it's worked really well at the state level. We're now seeing an interest in doing this at the local level here in Portland with the adoption of the charter amendment that the voters passed last November to set up a system of clean elections funding for candidates for mayor, for city council, school board, and other local offices. But the missing piece in this what we have going on in the state and locally at this point is the county level offices. And so we have seen candidates run for sheriff or district attorney. Last fall here in Cumberland County, there were enormous amounts of money raised and spent outside independent expenditures coming in from groups based outside of the state, spending enormous amounts of money to influence the outcome of the race for district attorney. We've seen this for in other county level races in the state. Some of these races don't really attract a lot of spending, but some attract enormous amounts of spending. I remember one race for sheriff, I think 4 or 5 years ago. Also here in Cumberland County, there were enormous amounts of money being raised and spent. So if we want to reduce the influence of money in politics, we need to look at all levels of government, including the county level. And that's what the impetus for this bill is.
Absolutely. And so this bill aims to look at all county level offices as part of what it proposes?
I believe so, yeah. So we're still working on the bill and sort of fine tuning the language in terms of what we'll propose to the committee. But I think we want to look at all of the different county level offices for register of probate, register of deeds, county commissioner, sheriff, district attorney, all the county level offices, and set up a system of clean elections that will work at that level. Proportional to the district size. The populations of each county obviously vary widely across the state, so we need to look at that as well, and having a system that provides a reasonable level of funding for a candidate to run in each particular county, a system that's attractive to candidates to use, and hopefully will be popular and be implemented and be popular and in place and used by a majority of candidates. I believe a majority of candidates for legislature now use clean elections, and we'd like to have that be the case for county level and other levels of government.
That's great. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen clean elections make a difference in running for the legislature during your time serving. How does it change who runs for office, what it takes to run for office, and how that might also, translate to the county level?
Well, before I ran for legislature, I worked on a bunch of different issues, and actually one of the first petitions I ever collected signatures on as a citizen was clean elections back in '95 when we were working to put this on the ballot, and I was in college in Orono. And at that time there were people who would run for legislature and serve, for many, many years. It was before the time of term limits, and money had a big influence in the outcome of elections, and special interests really kind of had superior amounts of influence in Augusta. Lobbyists had lots of influence with legislators in Augusta, and the lobbyists, I mean, they're still there in Augusta today, but they don't have the kind of influence they used to have, because candidates aren't as beholden to them as they used to be, especially if they are funded by a system of public financing. So it's made a big difference in the influence of special interests and lobbyists, but it's also made a big difference in who's actually able to run for legislature. So in Maine, the legislature doesn't pay very well for people to serve in the legislature. It's a very low pay, and so as a result of that, it's very difficult for people to even be able to run. But even just running a campaign, having access to funding to be able to run for legislatures is difficult for people who aren't connected in the way they would need to be to raise a lot of money. So I know people that wouldn't have been able to run for legislature if it wasn't for public financing. I myself wouldn't have been able to run for legislature if it wasn't for public financing. I ran as an independent candidate back in 2010. And I don't come from a family with a lot of money. I'm not wealthy myself, and so running as an independent without a lot of connections to money would have been very difficult. But with clean elections, that actually allowed me to be able to run and collect $5 donations, receive an adequate amount of funding for my campaign, and even though everybody told me I couldn't win as an independent, I ran with clean elections, went door to door, and was able to win by 170 votes. And so I wouldn't be here today. I certainly wouldn't have been able to run for state senate without clean elections, because they're a much bigger district and more expensive race to run. So it really impacts who's able to run for legislature in the first place, the amount of influence that lobbyists and special interests have in the outcome of elections, and it's just really, really important, and certainly it's an optional system. It's not mandatory that people use it, but it's very popular. It's being used by a lot of candidates across the state, and I'm glad we have it in place.
Definitely, and we would certainly hope to see that with it expanded to the county level as well. I would imagine more people able to run for those offices. That'll be really, really excellent to see.
Yeah, well, county level offices are not sometimes are not all that popular of offices to run for, like county commissioner. Sometimes they're unopposed, but a county-wide race. I mean, county commissioners are districts, at least in most counties, they're district proportional to the population. But running a county-wide race in a large county with a lot of people, to get your message out, to be able to communicate with voters, it's enormous. It's just the thought of it. It's not something I think would be easy for a lot of people, but if they could qualify for public funding and have what they would need to run a campaign, I think more people might run. So that's important too. But certainly reducing the influence of money in politics is absolutely critical at all levels of government, including county.
Absolutely. And finally, to wrap this up, kind of put a bow on that, I was wondering if you could just speak broadly to any thoughts on or reflections you have just kind of generally on the importance of taking on campaign finance reform, campaign finance transparency. There's several other pieces of legislation we're hearing about today that are also in this field. If you could just speak to why that's so important to having a well-functioning democracy.
Yeah, so we've done quite a bit in the last few years, with restricting, donations to PACs, and not allowing legislators to run PACs, and limiting when donations can be given to PACs, and that type of thing. We've also done a lot to expand our democracy in general with automatic voter registration, with protecting the polling place, and also protecting the right of citizens to collect signatures in the polling place. I mean, it's just been a lot that's gone on in the last few years around democracy in general, and we've made some real progress. But there's definitely we still have more work to do. Definitely have more work to do. And so, yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is important. There's a lot of bills coming up this session that are really important. Some bad bills and some good bills. So we've got to defeat the bad bills and pass the good bills.
Absolutely. Well, I know this is one of the good bills we'll be very excited to work on. So, Senator, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, and we're really excited to move this proposal forward.
Absolutely. I look forward to working with you and all of the members and folks that do work with your organization across the state so that we can move this bill forward and pass some other good pieces of legislation this session. So thanks for having me on to talk. It's been great to meet with you and answer questions, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you to Will and to Senator Chipman for recording that section for us. This is a bill that I'm really excited about as well, and very, yeah, it'd be great to see how we can move forward with it. In our last few minutes here, I just want to touch on our other clean elections piece that we have. There we go. Sorry, hold on a second. I can go backwards, I'm sure, somehow here. Our Portland Clean Elections program, which was passed by voters this past November, and now we have a very tight timeline to implement it and to be ready for the 2023 elections. This year, it would be used for mayor, for several council seats, and for several school board seats. And what we've got up on the screen here is some proposals that we put together for Maine Citizens for Clean Elections for what we think this program could look like. The council and city staff are currently working on some proposals. They will come up for public comment. We'll be sure to let folks know as this process moves forward. They're looking at having ordinances around the specifics of the program put in place by March or April in order to allow candidates, particularly those who are thinking about running for mayor, to be able to know for sure what the program would look like, how they could use it, and choose to participate in it. We, in looking at this, used a combination of historical spending in these races and trying to do something that would be comparable on a population basis to how the state clean elections program works. So there would be different amounts that candidates for each of these types of races would be able to qualify for, an initial distribution, and then a maximum that they could reach if they continued to collect $5 contributions and get public support. The other thing that I want to mention with Portland is that the charter amendment that was passed is flexible enough that it would allow both a clean elections, Maine Clean Elections Act style program like is described here to be implemented in the city. It also would allow us to use a democracy voucher type program, which is what Seattle does. And that allows every voter in the city to get vouchers that candidates can qualify to collect and redeem for funding, and we think is intriguing because it could allow for greater participation in the public funding program in the city in the future. Our sense, and the sense of the city administrators, is that that type of program might be too complex to get off the ground as quickly as is needed, but we are nonetheless encouraging the city to keep that in mind and to think about not only what's needed for this year, but after the next election, to put together a report and to say how we can keep improving clean elections at the municipal level for Portland. With that, I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and also if there are comments from other members of our team here on these clean elections issues that we haven't touched on that you want to raise.
Martha had a question in the chat about the second aspect of the citizen-initiated referendum, and I wondered if you wanted to pick that up, Anna.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, I think Martha's question was what, basically why add the constitutional amendment piece to the Protect Maine elections effort. I can say from an MCCE perspective, we've been supporting a constitutional amendment for a very long time and worked on getting the legislative. I'm totally failing to think of the word. It's not a proclamation, but
A resolution. It was a resolution.
Thank you. A legislative resolution directing our U.S. Congressional delegation to work towards this. But that was back in 2012. And so you can definitely see the value of reaffirming our support since some time has passed. But Kaitlin, I'm wondering, since we have you here, if you wanted to say anything about how you see these, these two pieces of the bill as being tied together and benefiting each other.
Absolutely. And I think your point is spot on as well, is that Maine has already been a leader in this space. And then by adding the accountability piece that I mentioned earlier with our ethics commission to report on it, I think just strengthens the work that we've already done. Also, where the foreign government, prohibiting foreign governments from influencing our elections, that's a big deal, but it's also fairly narrow in scope when it comes to the whole money and politics in the grand scheme of things. So by continuing to emphasize the need of a constitutional amendment, we're really looking at, what is possible and tackling the corruption that we see with money and politics. And so that's why I think it's so important. We got to get at this, right? We're at an inflection point here, and it's just important. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think you touched on something really important with all of this work, which is that sometimes we have to work toward both things that we know will be deeply impactful in the long term and get at the roots of problems, but that are, tough to get. They're going to be big fights and they're going to take us a long time to get there. And then there's things that we know, okay, we see an opportunity right now to grab this piece and make some immediate progress on something that matters, but that may be fairly narrowly defined. And it's important for us to be doing both, in my view, and that we can be making progress incrementally and with that vision toward the big changes that we want to see. With that, I see. We just had a question about what the constitutional amendment specifies, and there isn't specific language that it is promoting in my understanding of that, but that it would allow the Congress to be able to regulate spending to prevent corruption. And if anyone else in the team wants to say anything more about this, specific language, this is a topic that certainly people have put forward a lot of different proposals.
Yeah, I just add that you're absolutely right, Anna. Our supporting such an amendment, we're not being prescriptive as to exactly what that language and amendment would look like. I mean, that is going to take a lot of working through in Congress, and so we are just supportive of it and look forward to seeing it happen.
In general, the two aspects of that amendment that are talked about is, one, corporations are not people, therefore corporate contributions can be booted from American elections, and two, it's okay to regulate money in politics. It's okay to regulate spending and raising of money in elections. So those are the two general concepts that when we talk about a constitutional amendment, people are referring to.
And if it's of interest, without endorsement, there was a bill introduced in the House to propose a constitutional amendment along these lines. And I think the language in that bill is the language that's been under debate for a couple of cycles now.
But over the years, there have been dozens of bills, I think.
Yeah.
Many bills to do one aspect or the other or both.
And I believe that I'm not sure about this most current bill, how many of our congressional delegation are signed on to it. In the past, at various points, we've seen both our representatives and Senator King sign on as co-sponsors. We have not seen that from Senator Collins, but we continue to push for that and encourage her to, to stand with how Maine people have indicated they want her to on this.
And she was outraged when Citizen United passed and was very, very clear in the press about the devastating effect she thought it would have. So
we are up against 1 o'clock here. So the last thing I just want to mention is that how can you get involved in this? Well, you can join our Money and Politics team, where we work through these issues, where we've been coming up with our all of these legislative proposals, and we'll be working to get these passed, as well as reviewing other bills that come up in this current legislature. We always welcome new members of our team. And in particular, we are hoping that many of you will join us for our lobbying day at the State House, February 14th. This is a joint lobbying day with the League of Women Voters and Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. It's also the League's 103rd birthday, and it will involve us working on several of the bills that we've discussed today, in particular, talking to legislators about the Protect Maine Elections campaign, as well as some of our other elections and democracy reforms. And we'll also have a really nice panel discussion with some of our youth leaders at the Blaine House in the afternoon. And you can register for that online on through the League website, and we will make sure to send out to folks who attended here the ways to take action, the ways to register for that event and other things in the future. And I will just also say, as these bills come up, they get closer to their public hearing, we will be putting out more information about each of them and specific calls to action, so that you'll know when it's time to contact your legislator about those in particular. But there's also no reason why you can't proactively say, there's a bunch of great stuff that's coming forward on Money and Politics this year. I hope you'll support it and keep an eye out for it. So that's always a way that you can be engaged as well. Thank you so much to Ann, Allison, Lane, Kaitlin, Senator Bennett, Senator Chipman, Will, our whole team, Jen for running our tech and making us look good. I appreciate everyone's support today and everyone who came out to learn more about these issues.